Okay. We're going to make today a סיום on מסכת הוריות. It's a small מסכת, but it's the final מסכת of Nezikin. What I mean is the final מסכת of Nezikin. As far as Gemara is concerned, this is the final מסכת. Afterwards, there still is the מסכת Idiots, and there's the Pirkei Avos, but those are all Mishnahs. And Gemara in Seder Nezikin finishes in Horius. The end of Masechta Horius talks about Kavod HaTorah and talks about the importance of respect and the kedima that a Ben Torah gets, to the extent that the Mishnah, the final Mishnah of Masechta Horius says that Mamza Talmud Chacham is Kaidem L'Kohen Gadol Amoritz, to such an extent. I'm not going to go into it, but those are the words of the Mishnah. If you want, you can look it up. But at the end of Masechta Horius, the Gemara tells two stories, and we'll mention those two stories, and then I'll talk about something else also. Connect also, we have to learn Rambam, have to do with the Beis HaMikdash. We'll connect it all together. One story goes as follows. It says over here, Rabbi Yochanan said, Pligi bar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel v'Rabbanan. There's a dispute. Chad Amar Sinai Odef, v'Chad Amar Oika Harim Odef. Sinai Odef means that he's a very big bucky. He knows everything, just like the Torah that was given on Sinai. He knows everything. And Oika Harim means someone that's could uproot them. He's a gewaldige mefalpo. It could be mefalpo because it's forest and pilpul and everything. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yosef Sinai, Rabbi Yosef was a Sinai, and Rabbi Oikaharim, Shochul Utaman, they sent a question to Eretz Yisrael to ask, Eza Mahem Kaidim, which has preference or priority one over the other. If you want to give a position, what type of Rosh Yeshiva or Rav should you take? Shochul Lahu, they answered back, Sinai Odef, the one that is a bucky and knows everything, he is preferred, because the Amamah, because they're saying, Hakol Tzrichem L'Marei Chita, everyone needs wheat. In other words, everyone has to eat bread, and you can't eat bread if you don't have wheat. So it's a staple that you can't avoid having, you must have it. Something Gemara. So what happened was that they appointed Rabba as the Rosh Yeshiva. Even so, but Kibu Rabbi Yosef Olei Melech, Rabbi Yosef did not accept to become the Rosh Yeshiva. He waived it. He was offered it. He had the quality to be, and he let it go. Molech Rabba, Esem Vataten Shnin. Rabba was a Rosh Yeshiva for 22 years. V'hoda Molech Rabbi Yosef. After he passed away, or whatever was, then Rabbi Yosef took over, and he was a short time Rosh Yeshiva. Zot the Gemara, B'chol Shnei the Molech Rabba, all the years that the Rabba was there, for 22 years, Rabbi Yosef afilu umna l'beisai loy cholif. In other words, they had what they call a blood letter, someone that takes out blood. They in those days, most of the sicknesses, today also when you go to the doctor, he always wants to take a test from the blood. So they felt that a lot of sicknesses come from a surplus of blood in the body, and they used to take out the blood. That's why the barbers had a red and white thing in front of it, because the barber used to do that many, many years ago in America.
Bankis.
Huh? It's called bankis in Yiddish. Right. So there's different pshatim over here. One pshat is that because of the schus and the anivus that the Yosef had, that he gave up the position, so he was zeicher that he was healthy. He didn't need a doctor. And some say the pshat is that a chosh of a person, the doctor would come to him, and an ordinary person would go to the doctor. So Rabbi Yossi went to the doctor. He didn't call the doctor to his house like by Rabbi. The doctor came to his house. He was the Rosh Yeshiva. But Rabbi Yossi, there's different pshatim in Rashi over it. Now the Gemara says another story. Abaye v'Rava. Now, incidentally, a lot of people learn Masechta Saita, and Masechta Saita ends with the question: if bottle anova, if a nova became bottle, and at the end, the last piece of Masechta Saita is Rabbi Yosef Latana. Rabbi Yosef said to the Tana, "Letisne anova dik ano." Don't include in the Mishnah anivas because I'm an onav. And the question is, where do we see that Rabbi Yosef was an onav? So the answer from this Gemara, you see that he gave up the position to Rabbi because of anivas. Okay, now the Gemara brings another story. Abaye v'Rabba Reb Zera v'Rabba Bamasa. There were 4 chachamim who were Havi Yosfi. They were together. And they needed a Rosh Yeshiva. You can imagine these people needed a Rosh Yeshiva. Amru, they said, Kol the Amma Milsa Delay Mitrach. Whoever will say a Chiddush was not abfragen, that it will remain. He should become the Rosh Yeshiva. So the Gemara tells you a story. The Kula Ifrach, all 3 of them set Chidushim and mit abgeschlagen im Chiddush, aber der Abaye le Ifrach. So Havi Rabba, so he became the Rosh Yeshiva. Havi Rabba, I'm sorry, Chaze Rabba Abaye. So Raza looked at Abaye and says to him, the governor, he's become the Rosh Yeshiva. Amalei Nachmeni Pesach ve'ema. Hey, van sagen, you're the Rosh Yeshiva, zog. So the Gemara. Iboy v'hu Reb Zera v'Rabba Rab Masna. The other 2 that were there asked the question. Their question was, Hey minayu odav, what is better? Reb Zera Choref. Reb Zera was very sharp, very quick and very sharp. Big Talmud Chacham, and it would quickly come to a conclusion, and Choref u'Maksha, but Abba Masna Moslem u'Masak. He was very patient. He analyzed things and he studied things, and he didn't give a decision right away. So the question was, this is something, if you want to know something like, where do we have such a thing today? I say that that's the difference between the way Meleret and Brisk, we Meleret in Shabin, in the Polish yeshivas, on the Galiciana yeshivas, different approach of learning. So the Gemara wanted to know what's the preferred way, and for the Gemara, take Segabud Mashayla. Now, even though Segabud Mashayla, but some want to say that what follows this Masechta follows this Masechta Pirkei Avos. And what's the first mission Pirkei Avos say? Having Misunim Ladin. That's why it says the first mission Misunim Ladin, because it's an answer to the Shaila over here. Okay. Hadanaloch Kaya Mashiach, Asliko Masechta Haidius. Now I want to say a shtickle lumdus on the Masechta. And what I said that will connect different things to it. There is a Gemara. Everyone knows the Gemara, but I'll repeat the Gemara. In the end of Masechta Tainus, the Gemara talks about V'hoya Tamu Yisrael, Yom Tamu Yisrael, K'chamisha B'av, U'kiyam Kippurim. Chamisha B'av, which is coming up next week in Mitzvah Shem, was a very great Yontif. And what did they do on this Yontif? The girls would go out dancing in the field, and they would appeal to the Bachim, and they wanted that there should be, a lot of weddings took place on Chamisha B'av. In order to, everyone should look good, so they would borrow clothing from another one. In other words, if someone had fancy clothing, not everyone had fancy clothing. So there was a whole system how they went around about borrowing clothing. Let me read the Gemara now. Gemara Mesechta Tainis. So the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, Bas Melech she'eles mi Bas Kohen Gadol. The daughter of a king asked a Kohen Gadol's daughter to give her a dress. Bas Kohen Gadol, mi Bas Sagan. Ubas Sagan, mi Bas Mashuach Muchama. Ubas Mashuach Muchama, mi Bas Kohen Hedget. That's the Gemara. So what do you see from this Gemara? In rank, who is higher? Is a Sagan higher, or is a Kohen Mashuach higher? Kohen Mashuach was one that was anointed for Muhammad purposes. So you see from this Gemara that being that it says that the Bas Sagan, mi Bas Kohen Mashuach, that means to say that the Sagan is in a higher level than Mashuach Muhammad. Right? Comes again the Rashash, and I'll read you the words of the Rashash on this piece of Gemara, and he says, Mashuach Muhammad, says over here, Mashmat is gan choshev tvei mi Mashuach Muhammad. Ubahoriyos, the Masech that we're learning now, Muvua hepach shteit vaket. Vu shteit vaket in Masech the Horiyos. So we'll go to the Gemara here on Daf Yud Gimel, where the Gemara talks about the dinim of kedima, of who has preference one over the other. And it says it talks of a shaila, what happens if people are in captivity, b'shivya, and you have to redeem people that are at b'shivya. So the Gemara gives an order, what way, who's first and who's next. So Shet over here in the Gemara, that Mamashal, Ish Kaidim wa Isha, then the Gemara says, Kain Sha'ava, and then the Gemara says, Kain Sha'ava, in other words, a Kain Gadol, that he was removed from his position, he's Kaidam v'Mashuach Muhammad. Now listen to this now. Next, Mashuach Muhammad, Kaidam was gone, comes before this gun. So Shet B'Ferish Gemara Punkt Faket that the Mashuach Muhammad has priority over this gun. Is a chastira, and the Rashash remains with a kasha and doesn't give a teretz. So that was a teretz, and that's what we'll try to do here today. In the din of Mashuach Muhammad, there's a very interesting Rambam in Klei HaMikdash. The Rambam in Klei HaMikdash says as follows: Kishiyamas HaMelech Kohen Gadol Oyecha Mishar Hamamunim Mamidim Tachta B'noi Oyaroi Uyoshet. This is the Rambam in Klei HaMikdash, Perek Dalet, Halacha Chof. In Halacha Chof Aleph, listen to this carefully now. The Rambam says, Mashuach Muhammad Ein B'noi Mismana Tachta L'Olam. That if the Mashuach Muhammad passed away or can't do his job, so his son does not take over. That Akasha, we know always there's a din of Yerusha, and Yerusha always is that a son takes over the place of his father. Why is Mashuach Muhammad different than anybody else? In fact, the Rambam said that every Srara, there's a din of Yerusha. You can't take away the position. I'm not going to go into the lumdus now of what exactly is Srara and what is not a Srara, what's considered a worker, what's considered Srara. We'll leave that for another time. But it's a thing that everybody knows that there's a din of Yerusha by Yidden. We learned in the Parsha last week also, all the dinim of Yerusha. And over here, the only exception to the rule is the Mashuach Muhammad. There's no din Yerusha by him. So some want to say that it's based on the pasuk, and some say because maybe the son is not very qualified and it's a very serious type of job. It's a bit doichik that Adraz says this. So I once heard a hezbah why Meshul Muhammad there's no din Yerusha, and the hezbah is as follows: Yerusha is because the Torah is nitzchi, and because the Torah is nitzchi, b'meila there's a din Yerusha that go over from one generation to another. A son is called Ben. Why is it called Ben? Because he is baina what his father did. His father started, and he's baina. That's why it's called Ben. So the whole inyan Yerusha has to do with nitzchias. However, the Torah is against Muhammad. If a medaf on Muhammad, you have to go to Muhammad and try to win the Muhammad. But the etzem zach of Muhammad, Torah is against. And Torah is shalom, and Torah wants shalom. But Mela, there's no din Yerusha over there because there's no inyan of nitzchias of taking over the Muhammad. The Muhammad, his father wasn't a father. So we see from here a din that there's no din Yerusha by a Kohen Mashiach. Going back now to the Gemara in Mesechta Tainis and the Gemara in Mesechta Hordiyos, there's a big difference between the two of them. In Mesechta Tainis, it's talking about the daughter of a Kohen Mashiach and the daughter of a Zgan. Being that the daughter is by the Yerusha doesn't play a role by Kohen Mashiach, but so the daughter is much less important. So therefore, this Zgan is higher than him. But the Kohen Mashiach, over here in the Hordiyos, we're talking about the Kohen Mashiach, who's B'shivya, and the Zgan is B'shivya. So then we say that being that he's Mashuach, so he's just like the Mashuach of the Kohen Gadol, so therefore he comes before this Zgan. But so there's a difference between this Gemara and that Gemara. Here we're talking about this Mashuach Muhammad is like a greater than this Zgan, but his daughter, who's the next generation, and Yerusha doesn't play any role over there, she is lower than the Zgan. That's how you can for the kasha from the Rashash. Now that we did that, so we'll go back to the finishing of the סיום over here. Hadan ulach kayim Mashiach, let's look at Masechta Hordiyos. Hadan ulach Masechta Hordiyos, Hadan chalon data, chalon Masechta Hordiyos, v'data chalon, v'nisash Masechta Hordiyos, v'nisash v'non, v'leibam v'deg v'leibam v'dasam. Hadan Masechta Hordiyos,